धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतंगमय। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
Suman? Suman is here. Suman, can we chant? Shloka 17.
Yes.
Yeah.
पितामहस्य जगतो माता धाता पितामहः वेद्यं पवित्रमोङ्कार ऋक्सामवजुर एव च. I am the father of this universe, the mother, the providence, the ancestor. I am the knowable, the sacred syllable Om, and also the Rik, Sama, and Yajur Vedas. All word and thought are an outflowering of the great Om. Om, the word, the eternal, manifest in the forms of sensible objects, manifest in that conscious play of creative self-conception, of which forms and objects are the figures, manifest behind in the self-gathered, superconscient power of the infinite. Om is the sovereign source, seed, womb of thing and idea, form and name. It is itself integrally the supreme intangible, the original unity, the timeless mystery self-existent above all manifestation in supernal being.
Krishnapani ji.
We actually go to the 17th verse. I think last time we didn't have some time to cover one important point pertaining to the 16th verse, especially regarding the term mantra. I just want to read the part written by Aurobindo in the book Essays on the Gita. The essays on the Gita are further elaboration on the various shlokas. The part that has been just now read by Sumanji is also covered here. But prior to that, he actually elaborates more on some other related aspects of these shlokas. So one aspect which I just wanted to mention with regard to mantra is, which is the term used in the 16th verse. In the 16th verse, there is this reference to I am the mantra. Mantroham Ahamevajyam aham agniraham hutam is what is the 16th verse. A very important point is there which Aurobindo highlights pertaining to the mantra. He says, the mantra of the divine consciousness brings its light of revelation. The mantra of the divine power, its will of effectuation. The mantra of the divine Ananda, its equal fulfillment of the spiritual delight of existence. So he is bringing three aspects into it about the mantra. One is the consciousness aspect of it, the other is the will aspect of it, and the third one is Ananda. In fact, these three terms are considered to be the attributes of the ultimate reality in one sense. Just as we have seen about Sat, Chit and Ananda being the triplicity or three aspects of manifestation, there is an aspect of the unmanifest reality also where we have this triplicity. This triplicity, he says, the mantra of the divine consciousness brings its light of revelation. You just note the wording he has used. The mantra of the divine consciousness brings its light of revelation. The mantra of the divine power, its will of effectuation. The mantra of the divine Ananda, its equal fulfillment of the spiritual delight of existence. So there is a revelation, there is an effectuation. Effectuation is bringing it into action, making it effective. And the third one is fulfillment. This is what has to be carefully understood. See, all these three aspects are covered when he says, I am the mantra. I am the divine word. See, we also have this concept of Nada Brahma and Shabda Brahma. Nada Brahma is the voice of the silence. If I have to borrow a phrase from Blavatsky, there is a book called The Voice of the Silence. The voice of the silence refers to the Nada Brahma or the Brahman aspect as a vibration, sound vibration, which is not audible because it is in the unmanifest part. When it gets manifested, it becomes a Shabda Brahma. So the Shabda is also considered as the primordial aspect for manifestation, and Shabda manifests through Akasha. So this is another aspect that is to be connected with. So here, when Sri Krishna says, I am the mantra, he is elaborating on three aspects related to mantra. Aurobindoji says, the mantra of the divine consciousness. That means the whole thing brings its light of revelation. We have equivalents in the Bible also, where the Gospel according to St. John, it begins with the saying, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So this in the beginning was the Word, it refers to the Shabda Brahma. And where was that Word? That Word was with God. And what is that Word? The Word itself is God. You see the beauty of it. And very interestingly, the Greek, I think it's the Greek term for word is logos. This term is used in the theosophical literature extensively, referring to that reality of manifestation. For example, the Lord of this entire planetary system or the solar system is called as the solar logos. That means the solar logos is the representative of that ultimate reality in manifestation for a particular solar system. And his physical body is the sun which we see. Just like as we have a physical body, The solar logos has a physical body which is nothing but the sun itself. What I'm trying to bring here is, please note the point that the word, the translation given in English as in the beginning was the word. If you see the original, the Greek translation, the term used for word is logos. Logos is that principle of manifestation which originates through word. That means through the Shabda Brahma. The Shabda Brahma is derived from the Nada Brahma. So the first revelation is in one way referred to as the word. In another form of representation, it is represented as light. And therefore the biblical statement, God said, let there be light, and there was light. That means prior to that, it was all chaotic and chaos and darkness only. When the manifestation takes place, it is illumined. It is fully illumined. And what is the source of illumination? It is again the sun. The sun is the source of illumination. So that is invoked through mantra. That is invoked through mantra. That's what I think in some other context I refer to the Ishavasya Upanishad. One of the mantra says, Satyasyapi hitam mukham. The face is covered by the golden disc. So who is JN? Who is JN? Could you please mute yourself? Sir, could you please mute yourself?
Jaya Nagpal.
Mr. Nagpal.
Just unmute.
Could you please mute yourself? Somebody else is also talking. Anu has not muted. Kamalji has also got to mute. Subbarao Nagarajan. Manjula Devi muted. Yeah, Kamalji is right. So it's only because of disturbance and for the problem of recording. Subbarao Nagarajan, can you please mute yourself?
Niket, mute everyone.
Anu has to also mute herself. There's a mute button, madam, the leftmost button. If you click on that, it will become orange or red. Yeah, you have muted yourself now. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So the statement, both the statements are right. When they say in the beginning was the word, and also God said let there be light and there was light, is the beginning. It's only a poetic expression of manifestation as a beautiful way of understanding. Let's not take it to be literally that way, but I am trying to refer to them to say that the origin is the Nada Brahma, and in manifestation we find Shabda as the beginning part, the origin of it. And similarly, illumination is the origin, which is the divine consciousness itself, which is invoked through the mantra. And therefore, Aurobindo says, the mantra of the divine consciousness brings its light of revelation. That is the first aspect of it. Then the mantra of the divine power, its will of effectuation. That means, it manifests as power which brings everything into activity. In order to start any activity, the essential aspect required is power, which is nothing but the will of God. So that is what manifests. Then the third aspect of it, he says, is what is the purpose of all this? The purpose of this, the mantra of the divine Ananda, its equal fulfillment of the spiritual delight of existence. The purpose is this fulfillment of the spiritual delight of existence. The very existence is something delightful. Otherwise, there would not have been a continuation of creation at all. The whole of creation is based on one simple principle of ananda or bliss. But what happens is that as it descends, it takes different forms from that original, pristine, pure bliss. As it descends, it becomes intellectual pleasure, it becomes sensual pleasure, it becomes bodily pleasure. So all these things are derivations of that ananda. And this is how the aspect has to be understood with regard to mantra. This I did not cover last time because of paucity of time. And I especially made a note of it to spend some time on that. I think that this idea is very clear about divine consciousness, divine power, and divine bliss. The source of all this, he says, is mantra. So the mantra represents these three aspects of revelation, effectuation, and fulfillment. Okay. Then we will go to the 17th one. 17th one, as he gives the commentary. Yes, please.
If we
Meena,
read
Meena.
if we read the 16th one, lower part of it,
Huh?
the explanation itself
Huh?
is beautiful thing which you have used. See the 16th, if you read the explanation has been the book,
Yeah.
it explains this. It is the effectiveness, revealing aspect, and the last uses the.
Okay. I think we did not cover it last time, and therefore I'm spending some time on that. I think I have covered it now. We'll go to the 17th one.
The last paragraph, explains that the way you have explained it.
Okay.
The last paragraph of the 16th.
You want me to explain?
No. I mean, I just wanted to that you had brought it up, so I just wanted to hear that.
Yeah. It is there in the commentary, and I have the book, the Essays on the Gita, and I'm reading it out from that. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Kindly mute yourself. Now we will go to the 17th verse, where it is talking about a very interesting thing. He has used in the shloka two aspects of it. He says, I am the Pita and also the Pitamaha. I am the father and also the grandfather. This is a very strange way of putting it, because this is to emphasize the fact that there is nobody prior to me. Even whoever is prior to me is also me. If you have a father, that person should have a father, and that person should have a father. So it can go on infinitely forever, because somebody should be there to as the origin. Now he wants to emphasize and say that I am the Pita, I am the father of this whole creation. I am also the mother. I am also the supporter or sustainer of this, and I am also the grandsire. I am also the grandfather. And I am the holy object of knowledge, Vedyam Pavitram. I am the Vedyam is what is to be known. That means the object of knowledge. Pavitram, I am that holy this thing of it. And I am the Omkara. And I am also the Ruk, Yajus, and Samaveda. Aurobindo says, all word and thought are an outflowering of the great Om. Om is also considered as the primordial sound. He calls this Omkara as something which is eternal, the word. There's a lot of Upanishads, several Upanishads talk about this Omkara. Can you just hold on for a second, please? Yeah. I'm audible now? Yeah. Okay. So several of the Upanishads talk about this Omkara. The Kathopanishad says, as though he is revealing a great secret, he says to Nachiketa, Yama says to Nachiketa, Sarve Veda Yat Padam Amananti Sarvamsi Tapamsi Chaya Sarve Veda Yat Padam Amananti Tapamsi Sarvamsi Tapamsi Sarvani Yad Vadanti. Yadichanto brahmacharyam charanti tatte padam sangrahena bravim om icchetat. He says all the Vedas which the Vedas, all the Vedas extol this secret, and all the saints and sages and those who are performing penances, they do all this penance for this. And those are the great sages and saints who practice brahmacharya. I am going to reveal that secret to you, and see that secret is nothing but Om. The Om we know. See, Om, unfortunately, the fact of the matter is we know the term, but we don't know the actual transcendental nature of this Omkara. Any amount of explanation is not going to reveal this transcendental nature of Omkara. And the Mandukya Upanishad is especially based on the Omkara only. The Mandukya Upanishad is the smallest of the Upanishads, which has only 12 mantras. And in those 12 mantras, there is this reference to this Omkara. Though it is the smallest of the Upanishads, it is said that this alone is sufficient for all the aspirants for immortality. Mandukyamevalam mumukshunam, for those who are seeking immortality or aspiring for moksha, Mandukya Upanishad itself is sufficient. In fact, the importance of Mandukya can be realized from the fact that the guru of Adi Shankara's guru, Govindapada is Adi Shankara's guru, Gaudapada is Govindapada's guru. Gaudapada has written about 214 karikas on the small Upanishad of 12 mantras. And again, Adi Shankara has written an elaborate commentary on this. I am trying to emphasize the fact that the transcendental nature of the Omkara is something which is very deep and which needs a tremendous amount of elaboration and understanding from the intellectual point itself. Realizing the true nature of it is something totally different. And Aurobindo gives a footnote to this Omkara and says, as the spirit of the gross and external, it is called as Virat. It's also called as the Vaishwanara, the Akara, the A-U-M. The A or the Akara, Ukara and Makara. The Akara refers to as the spirit of the gross and external, which is called as the Virat or the Vaishwanara. Then U, the spirit of the subtle and internal, it is called as Taijasa. And Ma, the spirit of the secret, superconscient omnipotence, it is called as the Prajna. Om, the absolute, beyond the three letters, is what is called as the Turiya, or the fourth state. So this is the importance of Omkara, and here, in this particular verse, Bhagavan Sri Krishna himself says that I am the Omkara, and manifest in the forms of sensible objects, manifest in that conscious play of creative self-conception, of which forms and objects are the figures, manifest behind in the self-gathered superconscient power of the infinite. Om is the sovereign source, seed, womb of thing, and idea, form and name. it is itself integrally the supreme intangible, the original unity, the timeless mystery, self-existent above all manifestation in supernal being. This is the translation, this is the elaboration given by Aurobindo for this Omkara. And he goes on to say, this sacrifice is therefore at once works and adoration and knowledge. These three terms mean works refers to karma, yoga. Adoration refers to bhakti yoga. And knowledge refers to jnana yoga. So all the three are integrated in this Omkara here. That is the reference to it. And he gives the quotation which I have read from the Mandukya Upanishad. That Akara is the spirit of the gross and external, which is called as Virat. Ukara, the spirit of the subtle and internal, called as Taijasa. And Makara, the spirit of the secret, superconscient omnipotence, which is called as Prajna. And Om, the absolute Turiya, beyond the three states of consciousness. Jagrat, Swapna and Sushupti. Beyond that is the state called as the Turiya state, or the fourth state of consciousness. So this is the importance of the term Omkara. And also please see how he has correlated to this aspect of karma, bhakti and jnana. He very clearly says this sacrifice, because earlier he has referred to the sacrifice, I am the Hutam, the 16th. You see, you have to connect this to the earlier one. He says, in the 16th verse, we have seen that I am the Yajna. Aham kraturaham yajnaha, swadhaham aham aushadham, mantroham ahamevajyam aham agniraham hutam. He is referring to that Yajna. That Yajna here is the sacrifice to which Aurobindo is referring. This sacrifice is therefore at once works and adoration and knowledge. All the three together. And he is also saying, I am the Ruk, Yajus and Sama. I am all the three Vedas. Actually, technically, Yajurveda is not considered as an integral part of what is generally referred to as the Vedas. It is only the division that has been given, and Veda, Atharva Veda is a very important Veda, no doubt about it. But generally, these three together, Ruk, Yajus and Sama, are put together and they are called as Trayi also. Sometimes in the Bhagavad Gita itself, we find this reference of Trayi and Traividya. This refers to the Ruk, Yajus and Sama, which he is mentioning in this particular shloka. And he says, I am that. More importantly, in another chapter, Sri Krishna refers to himself as the Samaveda. Among the Vedas, he says, I am the Samaveda. Samaveda is given that much of importance, though the Ruk is the original one and the most elaborate one and the largest of the Vedas, but he calls himself as I am the Samaveda. So without going much into other aspects of it, the point to be remembered is that he is the creator, he is the nourisher, and he is the sustainer. These are the three terms that are used. I am the Pita. Pita is the creator. I am the Mata. Mata refers to the one who nourishes the creation. And I am the Bharta or Dhata. He says, I am the Dhata, I am the sustainer of it. I uphold the whole thing. And is there anybody prior to me? Even that somebody who is prior to me is also me only. Therefore, he says, I am the Pitamaha also. If you see, you can correlate this with the biblical statement also, where Jesus Christ says, I and my Father are one and the same. There is a quotation, not exactly in the same words, but there is a quotation in the Bible which says, I and my Father in heaven are one and the same. So here, Pita and Pitamaha, that's what it refers to. I and somebody prior to me, you may imagine Somebody is prior to me, even that person prior to that is me only, prior to the whole of the creation. Okay, and as I said, I am the object of knowledge. The holy object of knowledge is me, Vejyam Pavitram, and I am the Omkara, and I am also the Ruk, Yajus, and Samaveda. Okay. Shall we go ahead with to the 18th one? Is there any further commentary to be read? Sumanji,
Yeah, I will read.
the 18th one.
Gatir Bharta Prabhu Sakshi Vasa Sharanam Suhrit Prabhava Pralayasthanam Dhanam Vidad. The path and the sustainer.
Suman, you're very soft. Suman, come close to me. Suman,
Yeah.
Krishna Paniji is very soft. I can make it a little louder.
Yeah. Can you, Sumanji, can you be a little louder or come closer? If you are using a phone, please come put it close to yourself so that it is more audible.
The path and the goal, the sustainer, the all-pervading master, the witness, the abode, the refuge, the loving friend, the emergence, the dissolution, status, the all-containing substratum, the imperishable seed, all am I.
Yeah. Continue with the commentary.
Not very clear, sir. Not very clear, sir.
You want me to read it again?
Yeah, please.
Krishna Paniji, there's only one, there's only the explanation, there's no commentary on this.
Okay.
I'll just read it again, Sumanji, because it's not very clear. Your voice is very soft. The path and the goal, the sustainer, the all pervading master, the witness, the abode, the refuge, the loving friend, the emergence, the dissolution, the status, the all containing, the imperishable, all am I.
Okay. Okay. So he is saying Gatir Bharta Prabhu Sakshi. Each of these terms we need to understand clearly. Gatihi, he refers to the goal. Bharta, I am the one who supports. Sakshi, I am the Lord or the witness. Okay. I am the Prabhu who refers to the statement of I am the Lord. Gatir Bharta Prabhu Sakshi. Sakshi is the witness. Nivasaha, I am the refuge abode. And Sharanam, I am the refuge. And I am the Suhrut. Suhrut means friend. I am the friend. And he goes on to, that is the first line of the verse. The second line says Prabhavaha. I am the source from which everything originates. And I am the Pralayaha. Pralayaha refers to the dissolution. Sthanam refers to the existence of it. And I am the Nidhanam also. I am the repository of it. I am the repository of it. And finally he says, I am the indestructible seed. Bijam Avyayam. I am the indestructible seed. It means that it originates from that. Everything originates because that is the seed of it. That is what is to be very clearly understood. Okay. The goal here, according to Adi Shankara, refers to the fruit of actions. Whatever you do, that comes to you as the fruit. And therefore, that is the goal. The goal of your action. Gatihi karma phalam, he says. Bharta. Bharta is one who nourishes or who sustains. Swami, Prabhu means Swami or the Lord. Sakshi he is the one who sees, who knows everything and who sees it. Huh? There is a Christian prayer again which says the same thing. Huh? Unto whom all hearts be open, from whom no secrets are hid. That is the nature of it. One of the prayers says, referring to the Lord, he says, unto whom all secrets are, all hearts are open, all secrets are known. So he is the Sakshi, so you cannot avoid him. He is the one who knows everything, and he is the witness of everything. And he is also the Nivasaha, he is the abode. You live and move in his being. That is the idea of calling as an abode. Then he says Sharanam. Sharanam is a very beautiful word. Sharanam is, if you know that you are living and moving in him and you are not apart from him, you automatically take refuge in him. That is the idea. You take refuge in him. So that is what is Sharanam means. Not that approaching him whenever you feel like or whenever you are in distress. Whenever we are in distress, we go to God and say, oh, you are my refuge, you are the ultimate and you are everything for me and please help me out. You have that, there's a Spanish joke. A fellow, Mexico, I'm told, is worse than Bangalore with respect to traffic. Mexico City is said to be worse than Bengaluru. So somebody was in a hurry. He had to go to office, and then there was a very, very important meeting. So he was, while driving, he was praying to God, God, please find me a parking place. Please find me a parking place so that I can be on time for the meeting and all that. And luckily for him, just when he approached his office, he found a parking there. The moment he found the parking, he said, okay, God, don't mind. I've got the parking myself. So you see, when you don't find it, you want him to find it. But when you find it, you think it's your own. You have got it on your own. That's not refuge. That is not refuge. Refuge is knowing the fact that you live and move in his being. He is the Nivasa. Once you know that he is the Nivasa or the abode in which you are living and moving, automatically you take refuge in him, and then there is nothing beyond him, and you won't go anywhere beyond that because you are already in that state of being. Correct. Where you have realized that you are living and moving in him. That is the importance of this term Sharanam. That is why it is given so much of importance in Buddhist this thing also. Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Sangham Sharanam Gacchami, Dhammam Sharanam Gacchami. I take refuge in Buddha, I take refuge in the Sangha, I take refuge in the Dharma. I realize that there is nothing beyond it. And that is the Sharanam. And he says, I am the Suhrut, I am also the friend. Who is the one who is closest to you? Who will never abandon you? Who will always be there if you really approach him? Who is always be there? Manjula ji, can you mute yourself? Thank you. Because what happens is suddenly the icons start appearing. Okay. So you see, he is the best friend because the important aspect to be realized is he is the only one who always thinks of your good and nothing but your good. That is the beauty of it. A friend is one who always cares for you and wishes the best for you and always good for you. Apparently, life as we lead may seem difficult, and it may appear as though that we are not happy with the way things are. If God is my friend, then all these things should not have happened to me, kind of thing. But he is not talking about your worldly goodness, good from the worldly point of view. It is only from the spiritual point of view. Only from the spiritual point of view, we have to understand that he wishes the best and he provides the best environment for our spiritual growth. So he is the friend. Then he is the Prabhavaha. He is the one from whom everything originates. He is the source. Pralayaha. He is the one who dissolves everything. And he is the Sthanam. Sthanam is Tishtati Asmin, in whom it resides. Nidhanam. Nidhanam is he is the repository. In a way, you can call him as the treasure house of everything. Nidhanam also refers to being a treasure house or a repository of all that is what we refer to as God. Can you just hold on for a minute, please?
Yeah.
Hello, sorry for the interruption. So you see, he is the repository of everything, of everything pertaining to the living beings. Because here you actually see the fruits of your actions and what human beings reap in the future also is deposited in this treasure house. So nothing is a matter of chance or accident, or nothing is happening which is not already in store for us because of our own actions. And we are continuing to do actions, and they get all automatically deposited in the treasure house, and at the appropriate time they bear fruit. That's the idea of Nidhanam. And he says, I am the Bijam Avyayam. I am the seed. And I am such a seed which is indestructible. It is indestructible as it coexists with the world. It coexists with the world, it can't be destroyed. The process of sprouting is always observed, so it follows that the chain of seeds is never terminated. The chain of seed continues. Because, as I said, it coexists with the whole of creation. So this is the idea that is presented in this particular verse. Okay? Yeah. So can we go to the next one? 18th. Shall we do the 19th one also? Because 19th with 19th, I think it comes to one closure of one aspect of it. Subsequent to that is a different topic.
Okay.
We can do the 19th also, and in fact, Aurobindo also closes with gives a unitary commentary for 17, 18, and 19. We can read the 19th one also, which is a continuation of the same idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sumanji?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we are able to hear you. Please speak slightly louder.
Yes.
Yes, Suman, a little louder.
Tapamyahamaham varsham nigrahidam yutsajami cha amritam chaiva mrityuscha sadasachaham arjuna. I energize heat, I withhold and release the rain. Immortal be and also to Arjuna, and being and not am I. It is he the divine that burns in the heat of the sun and the flame. It is he who is the cause of the rain and its withholding. He is all the celestial nature and her working. Death is his mask, and immortality is his self revelation. All that we call existent is he, and all that we look upon as non existent still is their secret in the infinite and is part of the mysterious being of the ineffable.
Yeah. Okay. Here he says, Tapamyaham. I am the one. It is he that burns in the heat of the sun and the flame. Tapamyaham. That means becoming the sun with some scorching rays, I cause heat. I am the one who brings light and heat and the scorch. It is necessary because the next one is linked to this aspect of heat, which is varsham, which is rain. He says, I am the one who collects it or withhold. Nigruhnami. Nigruhnamya aham utsrujami. Utsrujami is to give out. Holding forth, that means when there is heat, when there is heat, it is the one which evaporates the water. We know what we have studied in the school, the cycle, that the sun evaporates the water becomes vapor, and vapors become clouds, and the clouds again hold rain, and then they give rain to us. So he is referring to this whole process. He says, I am the heat and the scorch, and I am the one who withholds, and gives forth rain. Ikruhnami. I am the one who takes it and holds it. And I am the Utsrujami. I am the one who gives forth the rain, send forth the rain. And he says, I am immortality and death, both. Amritam chaiva mrutyuscha, both are me. I am the immortality and I am also the death. See, death is his mask and immortality is his self-revelation. Death is his mask in the sense the truth is covered and we continue to live in ignorance. When you are in ignorance, obviously the result will be perishing or what is called as death. Avidyaya mrutyum tirtva vidyaya amrutamashnute is a very beautiful mantra from the Ishavasyopanishad. Ishavasyopanishad gives a very beautiful mantra which says avidyaya mrutyum tirtva. You have to cross the ocean of avidya through mrutyu. The avidya or ignorance, with that we have to cross the ocean of death and come to immortality. Vidyaya amrutamashnute. We taste or we eat or we consume or we enjoy amrita or immortality through that, through vidya. That's why what is vidya? Sa vidyaya vimuktaye. That is called as vidya, which is liberating by nature. Only that is vidya. Not everything and anything and everything can't be called as vidya. It's only sa vidyaya vimuktaye. Only that is vidya, which is liberating by nature. So here he says, I am both, because you do not recognize my presence, and therefore I do not appear to you, and I am covered with that mask. And that's why beautifully Aurobindo said, death is his mask. It's not his true nature. Immortality is his true nature, which is self-revelation. Once there is self-revelation, that itself is immortality. Therefore, very beautifully he said, death is his mask and immortality is his self-revelation. And then another important aspect is also added here. Sat and Asat, both are me. Sat is being, and Asat is non-being. I am the being and the non-being, both. See, the beauty of it is the Lord is never absolutely non-existent. In the sense, he is beyond cause and effect. We normally understand that anything exists because of this chain of cause and effect. Something is there, so prior to it, something else must be there. And because that is there, something prior to that. So moving backwards or forwards, we see this chain of what is called as cause and effect. But he is beyond cause and effect. And therefore, in one way, he is non-existent, but you can't treat that as absolute non-existence for him. He is non-existent to the effect that he is not a part of this cause and effect cycle or cause and effect chain. So again, Aurobindo makes a beautiful statement. He says, all that we call existent is he, and all that we look upon as non-existent still is there secret in the infinite. It is there, but it is secret in the infinite and is the part of the mysterious being of the ineffable. We don't understand the nature of that. That's why it is ineffable and mysterious. And again, we need to remember every time that the chapter itself is called the royal mystery, Rajavidya and Rajaguhya. Is both the royal wisdom or the royal science and also the royal mystery. This is the mystery of it. When he says I am existent and non-existent, both, it defies normal logic, isn't it? Something can't be existent and non-existent simultaneously. It defies all logic. The logic is that he is talking about a state which is beyond the normal mental consciousness, which is caught in this cause and effect chain. Whereas he is such that cause and effect do not matter to him and do not affect him in any manner whatsoever. And therefore, he is beyond it. And in that way, you can look upon him as non-existent. Only look upon. That's what Aurobindo uses the term. We look upon as non-existent, not in reality. And again, as Adi Shankara says, the Lord is never absolutely non-existent, because that would lead to nihilism and other things. It's not that at all. But he is non-existent to the extent that we do not understand the nature of that infinite thing, and also we do not understand anything which is not in the chain or in the cycle of cause and effect. We have to go beyond the cause and effect, or in fact, actually, in one way, we can say that what we normally call as freedom or liberation or moksha or nirvana or whatever name you give is actually breaking this chain of cause and effect. Somewhere you have to break this chain. Then only one can go beyond it. As long as you are caught in this mentation and intellectual understanding of things, you cannot go beyond that. Beyond that cycle or the chain of cause and effect. And cause and effect is in another term, in other words, we can call it as birth and death. This chain of birth and death and reincarnation. So that is what he has earlier referred to as both are me. Amrutam chaiva mrutyuscha. I am Amrutam and also Mrutyu. As long as you do not know me or do not know my true nature of it, and as long as you are not able to remove that mask, it is death. And what is immortality? Immortality is his self-revelation, revealing himself. That is immortality. So you see this the sequence of the 17, 18, 19, they are all linked up where he is revealing himself or giving out to us the mysterious nature of that ultimate reality, which is both transcendent and immanent. It is both transcendent and immanent in this. So that is the beauty of it, because if you see every verse from 17, 18, 19, we find that there may appear to be a superficially self-contradictory terms, or terms which are used whose depth of understanding is not so easy, and that's why we need some commentators like Adi Shankara, and then in the modern discourse, somebody like Aurobindo Ghosh, who also gives a mystic dimension to the whole commentary on Bhagavad Gita. There is a mystical element which has to be experienced and not merely verbally understood. Otherwise, we'll never come to that mystery at all. That mystery will never unravel itself to us unless we go to it by abandoning this sphere of the limited operation of the thought and emotions and feelings, this what we call as this arena of cause and effect, which are bound by cause and effect. So that's where we need to transcend it and go to the higher level of understanding. And that's what very beautifully Aurobindo brings out in his commentary. Any questions? I see some chat here. There is some chat.
So, Krishna Pandit asked you that A, U, and M, when we do Om actually in yoga or in pranayam, then we actually, the A is supposed to come from the stomach, and U comes from the highest thing, and the M comes from the highest point.
Yeah.
So then,
Yeah, see, we do not really know how to utter this Omkara.
right, right.
See, I'll tell you a narration, a story about Annie Besant. During the inauguration of the Banaras Hindu University, I think, there was a meeting in which Mahamahopadhyay, Madan Mohan Malviya was there. In that meeting, Annie Besant was also there, and Annie Besant, when she was asked to speak, she started with this Omkara. Then immediately Madan Mohan Malviya got up and said, I have never heard anybody uttering Omkara like what you have just now heard Annie Besant do it. It is possible only for a saint of a very high order to utter the Omkara in the way Annie Besant has uttered. So you see, the very utterance of it has to vibrate through all the 7 planes of existence. Not only physically, the chakras being vivified and the sound coming from different parts of the physical body, but it's also at the subtle body and the Karana Sharira level, at the causal body level. That means all the 7 planes of existence can be vibrated. In fact, that is what is to be done before chanting the Gayatri Mantra. That's why the term Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha is uttered. Bhu means the earth. Bhuvaha refers to the intermediary world or the subtle world, and Swaha refers to the heavenly world. There are the 7 planes of existence or 7 lokas called as Bhuhu, Bhuvaha, Swaha, Maha, Janaha, Tapaha, and Satya. These are the 7 lokas. So when you say Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha, by the utterance of each term Bhuhu, the earth element should vibrate. in resonance to your utterance. Then Bhuvaha, the next subtler world should respond to it. Then when you say Swaha, that means by the mere utterance of this Omkara and saying Bhurbhuva Swaha, you are transported to the heavenly world. And from having reached that, you chant the Gayatri Mantra. That's the importance of Omkara. Yes, sir. There are no questions, only some listening by Janaki Ramji. Thanks, KKG, for providing good clarity as usual, and hope it remains in our mind or memory. Nice of you, especially as it is. No, it's not yet early morning here, sir. I'm still in India. I am going to the US on the 6th. I'll be reaching there on 7th morning. So that was one request I made to Veena ji also. The convenience of participants is important because if it's at 5 o'clock, it will be 4:30 early morning for me, which will be too early. So can we have some other timing where it is morning for you on Tuesday instead of evening? Is it convenient to the participants or not? Tuesdays, is it convenient to have it in the morning, say around 10 o'clock or 9:30? If it's convenient, we can have it on Tuesdays. Otherwise, anyway, you can all carry on with the program. The time suitability is the issue.
So can you just post on the chat what suits you? Can you please post on the chat? I've already, I think,
If Tuesdays morning, starting between 9:30 and 10, is it okay? So that it will be Monday evening for me, late evening for me, that's okay. That's okay. It will be 9:30. If it's 10 here, it will be 9:30 evening, Monday evening for me. If it's, is it convenient? So you can just post your convenience on the chat. So
can
that
you
we
post
can,
on the chat? Can they post right now on the chat? If 10 o'clock is okay on Tuesday morning.
Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock.
Anu said okay.
Somebody said evening.
Yeah.
Possibly, we'd say, I know, I can understand that it's a working day and it may not be.
Jankiram, Wednesday evening 8:30 doesn't work because then it's very, very early morning for Krishna Paniti. Right?
Wednesday evening, 8:30 p.m. onwards, who is that?
That's Jankiram.
Jankiram. Or Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, fine for me. 9 o'clock is fine for me. Tuesday morning, if it's 9 o'clock is okay for you, it's okay for me.
So I was just thinking about maybe 10 o'clock. Sajini, are you okay with 10 o'clock in the morning? Because then questions can be done. And any little thing that needs to be done can be finished.
We have Anuja's class sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
9 in the morning.
Can we do 9:30? 9:30 to 10:30? I'm okay with 9 also. I'm okay with 9:30. I'm okay with 10.
No, just maybe take the consensus. It may not be really convenient for many of them to post it right now. Maybe let them think over it and decide and let me know. Or see, I'm not insisting upon my participation also.
Yeah.
If it's because Malati ji says 10 a.m. is better.
But 9:30
for me, as I said, morning between 9:30 and 11 or 10 to 11:30 should be okay. I'm talking about your Tuesday morning, which is my Monday evenings. My evening time is that. Tuesdays, I don't know how many are actually actively engaged in working and work and being a beginning of the weekend working day.
Yeah, so Jankiram is right. Your participation is a must because what we are getting out of doing this, we've done Bhagavad Gita before, but doing this with you, Krishna Panji, is giving us a different dimension to it. So we need you for this. Otherwise, we would do it ourselves, but we wouldn't get that depth of knowledge. So we need you to be there. So I may I suggest we start at 9:30. So people who want to finish breakfast can do that. And 9:30 we can start between 9:30 and 10:30. Is that okay for everybody?
8:30 p.m. is 8 a.m. for me. Yeah, 8:30 p.m. could be late, too late, isn't it? Is Tuesdays? Is it okay? For me, it's okay. 8 a.m. is okay for me.
8:30 on Tuesday.
8:30 p.m.
Yeah. Okay. I don't mind 8:30.
No. It's not 8:30 p.m. for you, Maltiji. 8 a.m. for me. 8 a.m. for me is also okay. Tuesday 8:30 p.m.
Huh.
But it will be late. 8:30 will be dinner time or whatever it is.
We can do 8:30. 8:30 p.m. instead of doing 5 o'clock on Tuesday evening. Is that okay for everybody?
Say 8:30 p.m. would be fine.
8:30 p.m. is fine. Krishna Paniji, let's stick to 8:30.
Yeah, I don't have any problem. 8 a.m. is convenient for me. No problem.
Okay. So fine. Let's stick to 8:30 p.m. then.
8:30 p.m. on Tuesdays instead of 5 p.m.
Instead of 5 p.m., we do 8:30 to 9:30.
So
All right. A lot of people are saying fine, so I think we can go ahead with that.
Okay. So
Yeah. All right.
we can do that, and I hope there are no further questions on what we discussed today, or we are spending more time on discussing timings rather than the.
But this has to be sorted out because it's going to be for many days now.
Yeah. It will be for several months.
Several months, right? Exactly. Okay. All right. Okay. So I think we are set on that. If you have no more questions, then I can ask Sajidi to say Loka Samasta.
Thank you, Mr. Krishna Panji.
Thank you.
And I wish you a bon voyage.
Thank you.
Safe over there. Now,
Thank you.
Let's read to our Loka Samasta, everybody. Just chant it along, be cute, and send the Lords of love, peace, healing, light to the world, to everyone. Okay. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Shri Krishna Arpadamastu.
Thank you, everybody.
Krishna Paniji, have a good night and have a lovely.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. So,
anyway, not going to leave you that easily. So you will keep getting our WhatsApp messages and everything.
Yeah. Yes. I'll be getting WhatsApp.
Is this phone you're going to carry this particular number, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, fine. Okay.
My WhatsApp number will be the same. I'll be carrying my phone. Yeah.
And everyone, please join us on Thursday for our satsang. We have Swami Shiva Prakash Anandji who will be speaking to us on the spiritual approach to happiness. So do join us.
Okay. Thank you.
And I just want to tell you all that the Sunday Tattva Bodha program will start at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tattva Bodha on Sunday, that will start on at 10 o'clock.
Okay. 10 o'clock. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.